Ladies and gentlemen, we love that you are joining us here, and we hope that you could do us a favor. If you are liking our episodes, please share them. Tell us that you like them. Leave us a review, and we will be eternally grateful.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Wizard and the Priestess. We're happy to have you here. We're excited that you are with us.
Always.
I am your host, Nuala.
I am your other
And this
host,
is
Matt.
Together we are.
I'll say it, The Wizard and the Priestess.
Thank you, Matt. Do you want to jump straight in and give us a little joke for the jokey town?
I did ask a client when their birthday was, and they said March 1st. So I walked around the room and asked them again.
I just don't know. The talent that just like comes through you, like the channel that you are, is pretty outstanding.
Pretty impressive. Yeah.
And now, after our hit of an acronym last week, the PAIN, we're moving gently along. For what reason, Matt? What's brought this to your attention?
Well, it's something you see clinically all the time, every day, in some way, shape, or form, and that is PTSD. Now, a lot of people just correlate PTSD with like a major event such as abuse, or it's very common with war veterans, ex-soldiers, abusive household, all that kind of thing. But when you really think about it, everyone does suffer from PTSD on some level. It can be from a high school breakup, dating someone and being in such protection mode that you just sabotage the relationship. That is PTSD. But the D in PTSD, they call it disorder. But for me, that D can also be a number of words. It can be disorder, it can be dysfunction, it can be simply a distraction. So many people have their own subconscious strategy, but that's essentially set up by the unconscious, which is where the trauma is stored, and it comes out when it's been triggered by a word, a sight, a smell, whatever it might be. But everyone who's had any kind of life has some form of PTSD. Would you disagree?
No.
Excellent.
And that's what we have for you today. Have a great week.
Awesome. Yep. Thanks for coming. So is there a TCM approach, or is it highly individualized like most things?
Everything's highly individualized. I think personally, when I think of PTSD, I think of the let go that's holding it there. So there's the aspect of the post-traumatic experience that's still living as if it is today. So I remember we had where I used to work, we had an in-service with a lady who did a lot of work with children. And she used to talk about the whole idea of having a car accident. And then you would, like, say you hit a tree and then your body went into whatever spasm, and in that moment you stay there, and like your arms are still on the wheel, and therefore everything that was going through your body is still going through your body, and it never actually lets go and never actually moves forward. And the way that she described that like rang true with so many facets. So this like idea of, when you had an experience where, say, for the example you had before, like with a breakup, because actually biologically we're probably not meant to have more than one partner. We're meant to find one partner, settle down, make home, make children, live out our days, coordinating, working, and nowadays we're having these, experiences, say with like multiple relationships, and then I know personally you go through this phase of like, oh shit, it's over now. And you were my best friend one day and now you are dead to me. Like it is a death essentially. And it's quite bizarre, really. From a biological standpoint, it is a death. The body and the psyche would see it as such, or at the very least a separation that, you may have wanted, but it's still a separation nonetheless. And biologically, your body doesn't quite understand that potentially. And so then it holds.
There you go.
Go. No, I'm good.
Well, I was going to say biologically it might not understand because the desire isn't met. The biology wants to connect. And if that's, let's say it's a one-way street, then your biology would perceive there's something out of reach. But then the mentality of that maybe it's more metaphysical, that in that connection, you're caught in the denseness of the illusion that you are separate from that person, place, thing. And you look at the energy and everything is energy, so you can't be disconnected from anything or anyone, really. As soon as you think about someone, you're connected to them. And if we all come from a single point of consciousness, it's not possible to be separate from anything or anyone. But instead, it's that part of you that you're disconnected from. So it's not losing a friend per se energetically or psychologically. It's losing that part of yourself that you perceived in the other. Because everyone you interact with is just an unconscious projection of you and certain aspects of you. That's why some people trigger you and some people don't. Some people trigger you because they will show you your shadow. Some people will make you feel, incredibly in love and rainbows and butterflies and whatever else. And that's the part of you that is aligned with you. But then when we focus on the other and then if there's a separation, let's call it incongruency, where someone has separated themselves from me, then when you get past the ego stuff, that's really a version of myself that is no longer experienced by me. So what part of myself do I need to let go of? Because obviously that isn't serving me at this present space-time nexus. And if we perceive that in the past, then that's post, right? But we perceive time as linear, so past, present, future, where isn't it kind of funny that anytime you ask someone the time, isn't it always now? So we think of time as like a horizontal line moving from one side to the other, and if you talk to any past life regressionist, they'll say that they're connecting to you in a different life, but it's happening now, just on a different frequency. Just like if you're watching TV, all the TV shows are on at once, but you're tuning into a specific channel to have that specific experience. So right now you're watching the channel of Nuala, but all the other channels are still happening at the same time. But we just perceive that as linear time, which is really just an earth-based concept.
Do you know what else is another earth-based concept? Do you know how wild it is that there's no wires connected to telephones? What you just said about the frequency, we were talking about this last night, and I was talking about how exactly what you just said about the linear idea of time and this idea that there is energy right now picking up a picture, picking up a sound, and transmuting that somewhere else. Like there is a frequency energy, like I'm not connected to any wires. Somehow this is being projected all the way to you with what?
Magic.
Isn't it though?
Kind
Like
of.
my words literally like magically appearing in your ears through a screen and my picture. Like it is the same idea that when you're saying how we've got like when we're taking a piece of the thought and placing that piece as the one that we're looking at, and particularly with PTSD, we're taking that experience, we're looking at that thing, we're feeling it in our body in actual momentary, like in this time, but it's just a energetic chasm. It's just a vibrational piece.
It's just
So my question is,
yeah. Go.
when it is just that, right? I mean, it's actually magic. Like it's insanity, magical, wild, outlandish, out of worldly, esoteric. That I can be sitting where I'm sitting with no wires attached to any connection. There's no actual physical connection, but I can share all of this information with you directly, and you can receive it. And I just got sidetracked by my idea. Damn it. But I was thinking about how, and then in the same, we can have this experience that happened, say, 10 years ago or 5 years ago or a week ago or whatever, and we're still living in that experience within our body. Now, my question was going to be, if that is so simple and complex, like I just explained, how can we move through it more quickly? Or how can we release our ties or our energetic holding on that experience and move more into the now?
I think it comes a lot to our relationship to that experience. So
The perception of it.
yeah, so think of the label trauma. Now, who says that trauma is permanent?
Yeah, I mean, the word seems like it is because it's something, I guess it's something that happened.
So something that
So,
happened, so everything happens, right? It's just like, I find it funny when people say, yeah, I'll never get that, hour or two back again. And a part of me wants to say, got news for you. You're never going to get any hour back, but you want to focus on that hour. Cool. That's
that
fine.
particular 1 hour.
Yeah. And that experience we had, we're either going to correlate that with, I mean, we can only make sense of a certain situation from previous experiences. It's going to make us happy. It's going to make us sad, traumatic, excited, whatever response arises. But in the case of like a PTSD or trauma, we're really heavily polarized to one side of that coin. And to the degree that we're we're polarized to that particular side, we get stuck there. We get stuck there because on some level we find some attachment to it. So we can attach ourselves to it. There's some form of familiarity with it. Therefore, that correlates to us with safety, but then it gets stuck in the body. In the brain, it's usually a kind of prefrontal cortex type holding pattern. But then there's no, to the degree that's stuck there, there's no other space to be present. And if one view is heavily sided, then the other side of that coin can't be processed, at least on the conscious level. So from that lack of conscious processing capacity, we then need to, because we need polarity in order to be conscious of something, we need to create a shadow. And most people correlate the shadow with fear because it's all scary, because it's unknown. But then we perceive that to have more and more drawbacks. And if we can get to a point where we can be brave enough to sit in the silence and allow what needs to be revealed, which is from the other side of the equation, then we can bring ourselves into the now. So a lot of it comes back to, I think it was episode 7, about setting your intention.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people will get stuck in the PTSD, especially if they go to some kind of medical professional and they get, labeled with that label, the diagnosis. And then some people will self-identify and attach themselves to that label. And when they meet people, it's almost like a part of them wants to say, I'm insert name. I have PTSD, or I have anxiety disorder, or I have depression. I have bipolar. I have whatever. And then that becomes their identity. And without that identity, they have no idea who they are anymore. Because on some weird level, that attachment gives them some kind of power in their own perception, or it gives them some kind of leverage against other people.
Yeah, there's the secondary gain of maintaining the status of being the person with disorder.
Yeah.
Or distraction or whatever it
So,
might be.
Then saying that, people automatically think or know how to act and what to say around that person. So then that person with the label has this sort of secret magic power of how to condition people around them. If they don't want to hear certain words, then they've got the power to kind of make that happen. But then you can say, I've got the power to make that happen, but also at the same time, paradoxically, you're a slave to that. Because you can't control what everyone says or does. And inevitably, someone's going to say it or do it that's going to trigger it. So depending on the person, they might go from relationship to relationship, or metaphorically, live their lives with the remote, flick, 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 changing the channel. Because they can't focus on one thing. They've got to jump to another.
So what's a really simple tool or connecting aspect? You mentioned one must sit, be in silence to be able to reveal. So is that what you're suggesting someone may do in order to kind of identify and then clear or soften or discharge some of the energy around
I think
experience?
sitting in silence is one way. I don't think there's one way to deal with everything. I think it really depends on the individual. I know a lot of people with emotional and diagnosed mental disorders or dysfunctions. They hate being alone, or they hate silence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember me bringing up the, what's it called? The baby bear kind of concept. So if you think of the throat chakra, your communication, your articulation, that's baby bear. Your heart is mama bear, how you feel and what you want. The head, the intellect, is papa bear. Typically throughout the day during work, papa bear is feeding baby bear. So your intellect is constantly articulating and blah, blah, blah. When you're at home, when it's a lot quieter, maybe you're physically by yourself, maybe even emotionally, then mama bear starts to rise up to feed baby bear, because the intellect, we get mentally tired. And a lot of people don't like being alone because that brings stuff up for them. And that's where they might go for a bottle of something or some kind of quote unquote medicine. Vice.
Oh.
And they might find consuming that vice helpful, and it almost works. But then they keep doing it, they keep doing it, they keep doing it, they keep doing it, and it almost works every time. So you can see how an addiction can form from that. Or certainly let's call it a habit at very least. So it really depends on the person and what kind of personality they have.
So let me put it to you this way. For someone who has an awareness that they have experienced some form of trauma and they are living not optimally, they have some form of post-traumatic disorder, or they are responding and living in their lives in reaction to something that happened. They have an awareness around that. They are aware enough that they may have used some form of vice to create a certain habit that kept them kind of comfortable. Now they're aware enough of that. They're not quite capable of sitting in silence for a really long period of time, because that just feels too out there for them. They can't quite quieten down their mind because it's too busy trying to feed them things to keep them there. And I think I've shared this before, but that idea is that, the shadow, or from my perspective, the security guard, is going to continue to keep the little person inside of you safe, and in a way is going to make you act in certain ways that aren't really seen to be not necessarily not humane, but more, they're lacking culture, they're lacking their depth in humanness. And so that person, what could they potentially do? What would your sort of maybe key, obviously everyone's going to be different. So maybe there's a few different avenues that someone could take to start to take the edge off, to soften down that security guard so that they can maybe see the light underneath that experience that is keeping them chained to a habit or to an experience.
If they want to see the light, we've got to identify the light. So the light needs to be the dream, goal, or objective. If they're stuck in a certain pattern, then what's their reason to get out of it? Are they getting out of that pattern because they feel they should, or they could, or they would? Or is there something bigger than themselves to work towards, live towards? Does it for them, is it big enough to not need a nightmare? Because it doesn't
Let's say yes, it is.
Because it doesn't take any more energy to live your dream than it does a nightmare. So you can change. You don't necessarily need to change certain habits, but just change what's in the cup or the bottle, or whatever that is.
So, for example, the vice is alcohol, and if we change that to a tea and chocolate or something like that, is that what you're suggesting?
Well, that's one step we can take, because at least they're getting nutrition on board, and then you can coach the person. If you're going to have alcohol, have an organic version of it at very least. Have it with a meal, or like a full tummy. Don't have it on an empty tummy. So that's the worst thing you can do for your gut. And then the gut mind emotion connection, that just no good can come from that. So you can coach them on that. Then there's what was the other thing you said?
Tea.
Oh, I thought you said something
Tea
else.
and chalk.
Tea and chalk. Then show them educate them on the best quality chocolate to have. I would say minimum 70% dark, preferably organic. The less of the ingredients, the better.
Yeah.
And go from there.
So for example, so a good step to your perspective is to adjust the vice. And I guess I have shared that with so I shared this the other day. I thought it was maybe with you, but just that idea that we gently kind of change something out. So if you're doing something, I guess that's also a thing. If you find yourself in places where you are not, you don't feel joyful. And I think our world is so accepting of places like that, going to the pub can sometimes really feel like a habit over a joy, like providing joy. I think there's I just know my grandfathers, both of them would go to the pub in the night, and my grandmothers would be like, get home. And now as a mum, I just feel like the grandmothers of today, man, they withstood a lot, because not only did they have 5 to 10 kids, they also then did like the full day with their children, and then their partners or husbands had the audacity to go and spend a couple of hours at the pub to cool off, calm down, get over their work day. And then they come home a little bit inebriated, a little bit loose, a little bit ready to have a nice time. And their wife's been like literally cleaning, cooking, sorting, fixing, 10 children fed, bathed, into bed. Like that is no easy feat. And like they don't call it the boomer era for no reason. Like it's pretty.
I think it's a difference in values in that scenario.
Mm-hmm. In essentially like male to female values, or
person to person values.
Era.
She's valuing the family unit, getting the kids to bed and doing that, and he's valuing from his own perspective. In his perception, he's working all day to provide everything for the family, which then in his perception gives him the permission to go and let some steam off.
Mm.
So I don't think it's audacity, it's just a difference in values. But then ideally the communication would be had, communicating each person's wants, needs and feelings. And what you'll find a lot of the time, not necessarily in that situation, but similar, where there's a difference of values and opinions and all that kind of stuff, is that one person will evolve more than the other and quicker. And it's typically, I find people who evolve one chakra more than their partner, they can still kind of connect and find some ground. Although if one person evolves 2 chakras above, so you might be in a relationship and one person might be kind of 3rd chakra dominant, the other one might be, if they're 4th, there's some kind of connection there. But then if one person has evolved themselves to the 5th chakra and the other person's in the 3rd, they find it really hard to relate to each other. And then the person who's in the 5th chakra might want the person stuck in the 3rd chakra to come up. But the person in the 3rd chakra might just be happy chilling there. And they don't want to evolve beyond that. So again, there's an acceptance thing there as well. There's got to be a middle ground in that situation. But a lot of people don't have the awareness of that to marry that in to the relationship.
Yeah, and then you add in a bit of like someone stuck. So the third chakra person could possibly be stuck with a trauma piece that there's some form of secondary gain with that. So they're seen more because they have this particular experience or have had that particular experience. And so because they are gaining from that whatever that might be, they find that they're incapable of moving through or moving from that space because there's too much safety and too much comfort, even though it's hurting themselves as well in the same moment.
It could also be hurting the other, but they wouldn't see that. It's like if you were. Would you say it's fair to say that we've evolved beyond snails?
Snails?
Snails, not males.
No, I thought you said snails.
Yeah.
I would say that yes, there is definite evolution from a snail.
So let's correlate that with, let's say the snail is third chakra, the human is fifth chakra.
Mm-hmm.
A human can look at a snail and say, "Oh, there's a snail. This is what they do. They're a bit slow, but that's kind of their role here. That's what they do." A snail's not going to look at a human and have the same understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be the difference between someone who's stuck at a certain level and then someone who's evolved beyond that.
Mm.
So it's just completely different perceptions.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Especially when there's like a dog in the heart chakra in the fourth. It's like
Are we really going to the dog?
dogs always. Dogs are for heart, right?
For some.
That's the greatest
Some.
love.
Some.
It's interesting. I think when we come bring it back to PTSD and that idea from a Chinese medicine perspective, my personal perspective is that when we are holding on, we're always looking at the lung, and we can always correlate that to grief and the holding on to something because we are afraid of losing it. And if we think about that, we're afraid of losing it. What does that feel like when you're holding on to something because you're afraid of losing it rather than, sorry. What does that feel like for you when you're afraid of losing something?
I'm afraid of losing something. What does it feel like? Is that the question?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it feels like you're holding. I just got the image of holding like something really tight with my arms and perceiving it being yanked away from me and me just holding tighter and tighter.
Yeah. Yeah. So that essentially, depending on what the post-traumatic experience is causing, that is it. It's the holding that makes us feel safe. And it's in that safety that keeps us disconnected from that growth or that expansion and that movement upwards. And when we allow ourselves to kind of come to that awareness and be like, okay, so whilst I'm holding here and I'm feeling safe right now, I actually need to dismantle this or move from it. And one of the best things, and that's why, what you're sharing, like sitting alone might be difficult, but what really should be really powerful and potent would be to breathe and allow the lungs in that moment of feeling that feeling of like, I just want to hold it and I don't want to let it go, and allow yourself to breathe. And that's when the cleansing cry usually will come, and that'll allow the let go and the letting go. In the letting go, we actually dismantle all of the preconceived ideas that we've had that held us or are holding us, keeping us in a holding pattern. And like you just shared, for me personally, when you shared that, like I viscerally felt this sensation of the importance of holding that, the importance of holding, say, a child or parent or someone who feels safe, and really holding them and feeling that connection and the importance of keeping them.
Yeah,
And
I
so
don't
I
think
just
there's
think,
anything wrong with holding on to something because it would have served you at some point. But then at some point, what's serving you today might not serve you tomorrow or next week. So it's being consciously aware of those patterns as well. It just becomes dangerous when those patterns start to bend your perception of what you're going through now. So it's one of those things where we let our past dictate our future, really. And I know this isn't really the place of therapy, but a few suggestions that we can share quickly here is, one of the keys of overcoming a disease is there are clues in the diagnosis itself. So let's look at PTSD and break it down because we can expose some clues here. So the first is P, which is post meaning past. And the past is dead unless we keep enlivening it. And, patients would have had something happen to them in their life and it keeps coming up in dreams and thoughts and in conversations. And then that really keeps their past alive. And you can look at, I guess, a little acronym could be NOW, NOW, the N standing for not now. So whatever you need to do to bring yourself into the present, whether you click your fingers, kind of slap yourself, whatever you can do to bring yourself into the present and recognize that you're in the present and then commentate where you're at in that moment out loud. And that will acknowledge the presence or the present moment. The O in the NOW acronym could be neutral or omnipresent because the omnipresent now comes and goes at the speed of infinity. And this is the only place, i.e., now, where we can make change in our life. So when you catch yourself talking about the past, you can stop that, bring yourself into the present moment, talk in a positive affirmation, say it's healed and put it behind you at the best of your ability. And if it brings you into an anxiety attack, for example, bring yourself into the present by saying what you see in that present moment, journaling, releasing, breathing it out. But you have to intentionally do it. Even if you just say how scared you are in that moment, you'll realize how really not scary it is. But then creating a positive affirmation when the stress rises up. I get a lot of people just to clap and they might be in a situation, they just start clapping, but that's them resetting themselves. So the W could be went. So that time is gone. The past is gone and the future isn't here yet. When the future is here, we call it today. So if you're stuck in the future, then that's called futurizing. So this is when we can record our own affirmation, realizing that the past is the past. We think of, as I said before, past, think of a horizontal line, past, present, future. The present is the vertical line that we're always experiencing in any moment. And time being strictly an earth-based concept, we have this concept of time, yet we're probably the only creatures on the planet that let it rule us in the present. So we have a bit of a construed view on time, which is probably another podcast in itself. So then we go to we've done the P, now the T, so traumatic. So how do we heal the trauma? Well, first we need to have a holistic view on it. We need to not just be boxed in a diagnosis and be attached to this, attach our identity to that. Because as soon as we do that, then we slip into the child archetype, and then we get told what to do by not only everyone else of what we should do, but we only do what the diagnosis tells us we can or can't do. And it's funny because people say, I can't do this because I have cancer. I can't do this because of this. I can't do that. But it's really opening up to a holistic viewpoint, holistic meaning whole. So there is a bit of potential in everything, and there is a time and place for everything. There's also every technique is, if we can just use that as just seeing it as a tool, people try the same thing over and over and over again. And it might work for a while, but then that kind of plateaus. So any technique is just like a hammer. You need a hammer to build a house, but it's not going to be useful for every single job required to build the house. You can do exercises to heal. You can do rehabilitation exercises to heal, postural correction, strength conditioning. You can do Tai Chi, Qigong, exercise to harmonize breath and movement and stimulate, both heart meridians, and time that with your breath to synchronize your biological oscillators, your brain, your heart, and your intestinal tract. And it's in the lifestyle, right? So we still need to eat good food, regardless of what our diagnosis is. We still need to drink high quality water. We still need to get to bed on time. All of these little things add up. And that's how we can help the trauma along with it. Because we only have the capacity to heal from a trauma from the raw materials that we have on board, which is our nutrition. So PTS, S is stress. So this is where we get clear on our core values, get clear on what it is in your environment that you need to heal. Now, there's 3 levels to that. Paul Chek has the I, we, all model. So what do I need in order to heal? What do we need in order to heal? And then what do we all need in order to heal? Just getting really clear on those steps. Be clear while you're healing what relationships serve you and what relationships don't. Many people will often distract themselves by jumping from relationship to relationship and using stimulants and other things that don't really serve them. So it's really important to avoid stimulants like coffee, sugar, alcohol, and nicotine, or anything that winds up that fight or flight nervous system, as it's going to make things a lot worse. So, anyone who's lived half a life will have some kind of PTSD. The D, disorder. Now, if it's a mild D, then we can call it a distraction. If it's slightly worse, we can call it dysfunction. But as the diagnosis of PTSD, it's disorder, which essentially means out of order. So this is where you can work on your rhythms. So your sleep-wake cycles, your Tai Chi, Qigong exercises. The key is consistent, reliable rhythms, getting to bed by 10 p.m., up at 6 or when the sun rises. Try and spend an hour in the sun in a relaxed, meditative state. The best time to do these kind of exercises, sunrise and sunset. So using the techniques discussed here, along with a healthy diet, water, and healthy rhythms, you will find your fight-flight nervous system calming down, and then the rest repair system comes online, and you'll find your symptoms will progressively diminish. So just to recap that, the P is the past. It's gone, it's dead, it's not here anymore. Trauma is about healing, holistic exercise and lifestyle. S, stress, get clear on your core values, what you want your relationships to look like, what relationships serve you, what relationships don't, and be clear while you're healing. And the disorder, working on the rhythms. Sleep-wake cycles are the number one mechanism that regulate your biological rhythms. So just sticking to those simple techniques will certainly go a long way in helping someone with PTSD. So thank you guys for listening to our episode on PTSD. If you liked what you heard, please feel free to give us a 5-star rating, and a little warm review is always appreciated. Any questions, we are happy to answer any questions either on Instagram or wizardandthepriestess.com. So if you like our podcast, please share it with others, because we just want to help as many people as we can. If you didn't like it, that's totally fine as well. We'll just keep it our little secret. And until next time, find what works for you.
You've been listening to The Wizard and the Priestess. Thanks for stopping by. Stay connected and be open.